I found the forum because Paul forgot to close his laptop, which was not like him. In 18 years of marriage, my husband had become a man of rituals so precise they almost made a sound in the house. Keys in the blue bowl by the back door. Wallet on the dresser, left side. Phone plugged in before he brushed his teeth. Laptop shut, charger coiled once, never twice, beside the old green armchair where he paid bills and read fishing articles and pretended he was not watching videos about restoring cast iron pans. That night, though, the laptop sat open on the kitchen table, glowing faintly in the dark like a little aquarium. I had come downstairs for water because the heat had clicked on too high and dried my throat. The house was sleeping in pieces, the dishwasher whispering, the refrigerator humming, the maple tree outside scratching one bare branch against the siding. Paul had gone to bed an hour earlier with one of his headaches, the kind he rubbed at with 2 fingers while insisting he was fine. I nearly closed the laptop without looking. I had my hand on the lid. Then I saw the words at the top of the screen. I wore pantyhose under my suit today, and nobody knew. For a second, I honestly thought it was an ad, one of those strange, targeted things that appeared because somebody somewhere had searched for a Halloween costume. But the page was not an ad. It was a forum, plain and old-fashioned, with pale blue boxes and usernames stacked beside paragraphs. There were no flashy photos, no leering banners, no feeling of some secret alleyway of the internet. It looked almost gentle, like a place where people went to say things they could not say out loud. I stood there barefoot on the cold tile, holding my glass of water, and read the first post before I could talk myself out of it. The man wrote that he was 52, married, a manager at a small insurance office, and that the only time he felt calm during board meetings was when he could feel the soft nylon under his trousers. He said it made him feel hidden and honest at the same time. Hidden because no one knew. Honest because he did. I remember the exact strange turn of my heart then, the way it dropped and lifted together. I was not frightened exactly. I was not disgusted. I was startled by tenderness before I knew what I was being tender toward. Then I saw Paul's username. Not his full name, not anything obvious, but enough. P. North 47. Paul was 47. We lived on North Laurel Street. His profile picture was not his face, just a photo of our back fence after the first snowstorm the year before. A picture I had taken and sent him because the light had made each post look silver. My mouth went dry. Water glass still in my hand. I clicked his name because I was already falling, and falling has its own terrible momentum. There were pages of posts, not hundreds, but enough to show me this was not new. Some from 3 years ago, some from last month, some from that very week, written while I had been upstairs watching a baking show in bed, assuming Paul was downstairs comparing tire prices or reading the news. My wife G noticed I was quieter today, one post began. She asked if work was bad. I said yes, because that was easier than saying I wanted to tell her something I have hidden since I was 14. I sat down so fast the chair legs squealed against the tile. There was my initial. There was my life. Not exposed cruelly, not mocked, but laid open in a room I had never entered. He wrote about me kindly. That almost made it worse. He wrote that I was warm, funny, stubborn about planting basil too early, that I sang along with old songs and never remembered the second verse. He wrote that I deserved a husband with no locked rooms inside him. He wrote that he was terrified I would look at him differently if I knew he wore pantyhose. I looked toward the stairs as if he might be standing there, but the hallway was empty. The house seemed to have pulled itself tight around me. I knew in that moment that I had crossed a line by reading. I also knew I was going to read more. It is easy to imagine yourself noble before curiosity has your name in its teeth. The forum was called The Quiet Drawer. That name nearly undid me. It sounded so ordinary, so domestic, so much like the places in a marriage where secrets actually live, not in hotel rooms or dramatic letters, but in drawers beneath folded t-shirts, in browser histories, in pauses after simple questions. The men on that forum talked about pantyhose the way some people talk about prayer, or old songs, or the one room in childhood where they felt safe. There were jokes, yes, and little arguments about brands and sizes and whether reinforced toes lasted longer. But beneath the practical chatter ran a current of loneliness so strong I felt it in my chest. A widower named Alan wrote that after his wife died, he found an unopened pair in her dresser, black sheer, still folded around tissue paper. He did not wear them because he was trying to become her. He wore them, he said, because touching something delicate made grief less sharp. A truck driver from Oklahoma wrote that he wore them under his jeans on winter routes because the compression helped his legs, but eventually admitted that the comfort went deeper than warmth. "I spend all day being treated like a machine," he wrote. "This reminds me I'm skin." A younger man, still in his 30s, but old enough to have a mortgage and 2 kids, described buying pantyhose at a pharmacy and pretending they were for his wife. He said the cashier smiled without judgment, and he sat in his car afterward with the bag in his lap, shaking, because kindness from a stranger had almost broken him. And then there was Paul, my Paul, the man who trimmed the roses with ruthless patience, who cried once during a dog food commercial and denied it for 7 years, who could fix a leaky faucet but could not fold a fitted sheet without looking betrayed by fabric. Paul had written about being 12 and finding a pair of his mother's pantyhose in the laundry basket, beige and impossibly light. He wrote about pressing them between his fingers and feeling something inside him go quiet. Not excited in the way people might assume. Quiet. He used that word again and again. Quiet. As if his whole life had been a radio between stations, and this one garment, this fragile, ordinary thing, had turned the static down. I read until the numbers on the microwave blurred. I learned that he kept a small box in the garage. Not because he wanted to deceive me, he wrote, but because he could not bear the thought of me finding it without explanation. I learned that he had almost told me on our 10th anniversary, in a hotel room in Galena, when I wore a navy dress and we danced badly after 2 glasses of wine. He wrote that I looked so happy that night he decided not to risk changing the air between us. I remembered that night. I remembered him standing by the window after we came back to the room, looking down at the river with his hands in his pockets. I had asked what he was thinking. He had said, "Nothing, just lucky." At the time, I thought it was romance. Now I wondered if it had been grief. I closed the laptop sometime after 2, but I did not sleep. I lay beside Paul and listened to him breathe, the familiar soft catch in his nose, the little shift of his shoulder beneath the quilt. His body, which I knew so well, had become mysterious to me, not because of what he had worn, but because of what he had carried alone. I watched the dark outline of him and felt 3 feelings moving through me like weather. Hurt, because strangers had been allowed into a room of him I had never seen. Guilt, because I had entered that room without knocking, and a tenderness so large it frightened me. By morning, I had made coffee too strong and burned the toast. Paul came in wearing his gray robe, hair flattened on one side, and kissed my cheek the way he always did before reaching for a mug. "You okay?" he asked. That was the absurdity of marriage. Even with a secret between us, he could still tell when I had slept badly. I looked at his hands, broad palms, nicked knuckle from fixing the storm door, gold rings scratched dull from years of work, hands that had folded pantyhose in secret, hands that had touched me gently for almost 2 decades. I wanted to say everything and nothing. Instead, I said, "We need to talk tonight." His face changed before he asked about what. He knew. Maybe not the details, but some part of him had been waiting for those words for years. All day at work, I moved like someone carrying a bowl filled to the brim. At lunch, I sat in my car behind the library and cried into a napkin that smelled faintly of fast food fries. I was not mourning the man I thought I knew. I was mourning the years he had spent believing my love was so narrow it could not hold this. That evening the house looked painfully ordinary. Mail on the counter, a dish towel hanging crooked from the oven handle, the basil seedlings in the window bending toward the weak March light. Paul stood at the sink washing a plate that was already clean. I said his name. He turned off the water. Neither of us moved for a moment. Then I said, "I saw the forum." His eyes closed, not dramatically, just a slow, exhausted closing, like a man setting down a heavy box. "Gwen," he said, and my name sounded scraped raw. "I'm sorry." I had imagined anger from him, maybe defensiveness, maybe denial. The apology disarmed me so completely I nearly forgot my own. "I'm sorry too," I said. "I shouldn't have read as much as I did." He gripped the edge of the sink. "How much?" "Enough." He nodded once, staring at the drain. I wanted to cross the room, but I also knew he needed space to stand inside his own shame, without me rushing in to decorate it as bravery. "Is it true?" I asked softly. "Yes." The word was so small. "The pantyhose?" He swallowed. "Yes." "How long?" He gave a quiet laugh with no humor in it. "In one way, since I was a kid. In another way, since before we met. Not all the time, not every day. Sometimes months go by. Sometimes it gets loud in my head." He touched his forehead, then dropped his hand. "I don't know how to explain it without sounding ridiculous." "Try." He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw the boy from his posts behind the man in our kitchen. "It makes me feel softer," he said. "Not like I'm trying to be someone else. Not exactly. It's more like there's a part of me that has always been braced for impact, and when I wear them, that part unclenches." His cheeks flushed dark. "I know what people think. I know how it sounds." "I don't know what I think yet," I said, because honesty seemed like the only safe bridge. "But I know I don't want you standing there looking like I'm about to throw you away." His face broke then, not into loud sobs. Paul was not a loud man. But his mouth tightened, his eyes filled, and he pressed one hand over them as if trying to keep himself assembled. I went to him then. I could not help it. He leaned into me with his forehead against my shoulder, and for a while we stood by the sink, holding each other amid the smell of dish soap and burned toast crumbs still sitting in the trash from that morning. Later, at the kitchen table, he told me about the box in the garage. He told me about buying his first pair as an adult at a department store in another town, sweating through his shirt, rehearsing a story about a girlfriend who needed them for a wedding. He told me about throwing them away afterward, and then digging them out of the trash at midnight, because the shame of wanting them was somehow worse when he tried to destroy the evidence. He told me about finding the quiet drawer during a bad winter when his father was sick, and he felt like every part of his life required him to be sturdy. On the forum, nobody demanded sturdiness. Men asked one another where to find tall sizes. Men confessed that they wore pantyhose while grading papers, changing oil, answering emails, sitting alone after funerals. Men said, "Me too," and sometimes that was enough to get them through the night. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. I meant it gently, but it still came out wounded. Paul rubbed his thumb along a scratch in the table. Because you're the person whose opinion matters most. That should have made me the first person. I know. He nodded, eyes wet again. I know that now. But fear doesn't organize itself logically. I laughed then. Just once. Because it was such a Paul sentence. Careful and sad and true. The laugh loosened something. He smiled with one corner of his mouth, and I saw the man I knew inside the secret I did not. We made rules that night, though rules is too cold a word. We made a path. I told him I did not want to be managed or protected from his real life. He told me he did not want me to feel tricked into acceptance before I had feelings of my own. I told him the forum hurt because strangers had heard his heart before I did. He said he understood, then asked if he could show me the parts he wished I had read first. That surprised me. He opened the laptop with shaking hands and logged in while I sat beside him. This time, I did not feel like a thief. He showed me a thread he had started 2 years earlier called, "How do I tell my wife without making her feel like our marriage was false?" I read responses from men and a few spouses, all careful, imperfect, human. One woman wrote, "I was not angry about the stalkings. I was angry about being lonely beside him while he was lonely beside me." I put my hand over my mouth when I read that. Paul whispered, "That one kept me awake." "Good," I said, though my voice trembled. "It should have." The next few weeks were not cinematic. No sweeping transformation, no instant understanding tied up with a ribbon. We had awkward conversations while chopping vegetables. We had quiet evenings when Paul looked ashamed for no new reason, and I had to remind him I was not a jury. I had moments when hurt came back sharp and sudden, usually over small things. Finding out he had a preferred brand. Realizing he had once gone to 3 stores in one afternoon so no clerk would remember him. Noticing how easily he had lied by omission while telling himself silence was kindness. But I also had moments of unexpected grace. One Saturday, he brought the box in from the garage and set it on our bed like an offering. It was a plain plastic storage box with a cracked blue lid. Inside were a few pairs of pantyhose still in packages, some black, some tan, one deep gray, folded with almost heartbreaking neatness. There was nothing scandalous about them in the daylight. They looked like what they were, delicate, ordinary garments made strange by secrecy. Paul stood at the foot of the bed with his arms crossed tight. "You don't have to look." "I want to," I said. I picked up one package. The plastic crinkled. A woman with impossible legs smiled from the front, frozen in that bright commercial confidence women are always being sold. I looked from the package to my husband, this broad-shouldered man who had spent years hiding something so light it could snag on a fingernail. "Do you want me to throw them out?" he asked. The question angered me, not at him exactly, but at the years that had taught him love meant disposal. "No," I said. "I want you to stop treating yourself like evidence." He sat down on the bed then, hard, as if his knees had given out. That was the sentence, he told me later, that changed something for him. Not fixed him, not healed every old fear, but changed the temperature of the room inside him. In April, I did a thing I had not planned. I went to the department store at the mall, the one with the tiled floors and perfume smell, and tired mannequins leaning in impossible poses. I stood in the hosiery aisle for 20 minutes, reading labels with the seriousness of a scientist. Sheer support, control top, sandalfoot, queen tall, nude, black, coffee, smoke. I thought of all the men from the forum standing in aisles like this, pretending to shop for absent wives, hearts hammering beneath work shirts and winter coats. A clerk came over, a woman about my age with silver-framed glasses and a tape measure around her neck. "Can I help you find something?" she asked. For 1 second, old habits rose up. I nearly said, "Just looking." Instead I said, "I'm buying for my husband." The clerk did not blink. She did not smirk. She just nodded, as if I had told her I needed socks. "Does he know what style he likes?" The normalness of her question was so beautiful I almost cried between the beige and black racks. I bought 2 pairs, one charcoal and one black, because Paul wore those colors anyway, because I wanted the bridge between his private self and public self to be made of something familiar. When I gave him the bag that night, he stared at it for a long time before opening it. "Gwen," he said, barely a breath. "They're just pantyhose," I said, but we both knew they were not. They were an apology and an invitation and a boundary all at once. They meant I was willing to know him. They did not mean he owed me performance. They did not mean my feelings had vanished. They meant the quiet drawer was no longer locked from the outside. A few nights later, Paul wore them in front of me for the first time. He asked first. I said yes, then changed my mind, then changed it back after taking a walk around the block under a sky the color of wet slate. When I came home, he was in the bedroom, wearing his usual long t-shirt and the black pantyhose, standing like a man waiting for a verdict. The sight was both ordinary and immense. His knees, his calves, the familiar shape of him altered by something sheer and dark. I did not feel one clean feeling. I felt many. Surprise, tenderness, a little grief, a little curiosity, the ache of knowing he had stood like this alone for years, listening for my footsteps and fearing them. "You're still you," I said. His shoulders lowered. "I was hoping you'd notice." I crossed the room and took his hand. We did not make the moment into anything more than it needed to be. We sat on the edge of the bed, fingers intertwined, and talked about dinner, of all things. He asked whether the chicken had thawed. I said no. He said we could order Thai. I laughed because there we were, in the middle of one of the most vulnerable moments of our marriage, and somebody still had to decide what to eat. That is how life changes, I think. Not with music swelling, but with takeout menus and trembling hands, with a husband in black pantyhose asking if you want extra basil. Months have passed since I found the quiet drawer. Paul still visits the forum, but he does not disappear into it the same way. Sometimes he reads me a post, with the username hidden, and we talk about it. Sometimes I ask questions. Sometimes I do not want to, and he respects that. Once, I wrote a message in the spouses section. I said I was a wife named Gwen, married 18 years, still learning. I said I had been hurt by the secrecy, but moved by the tenderness underneath it. I said the thing nobody tells you about discovering a hidden part of your spouse is that the discovery does not only reveal them, it reveals the size and shape of your own love. I did not know my love had rooms I had never opened either. The replies came slowly over the next day. Men thanked me. Spouses warned me to take my time. One man wrote, "I hope my wife says something like this to me someday." I shut the laptop and went to find Paul in the garage, where he was sanding an old chair for no reason except that broken things bothered him. Dust silvered his hair at the temples. He looked up when I came in. "Everything okay?" he asked. I thought about the night months before, the blue glow of the laptop, the cold tile under my feet, the words that had opened a door neither of us could close again. I thought about all those men living double lives, not because they wanted to deceive, but because they had learned too early that softness was dangerous. I thought about the wives and partners on the other side, not villains, not saints, just people waking up to find that love had asked for a larger vocabulary. "Yes," I said, and meant it in the most complicated way. I crossed the garage, brushed dust from Paul's shoulder, and kissed him. He smiled against my mouth, shy as a boy and familiar as home. The chair between us was still unfinished. The air smelled like sawdust and spring rain. In the corner, the cracked, blue-lidded box sat on a shelf, no longer hidden, no longer announced, just part of the room. That was what I wanted for us in the end. Not a dramatic unveiling, not a secret life turned inside out for spectacle, just a marriage with fewer locked doors. Just Paul, my husband, softer than I knew and stronger than he believed. Just me, Gwen, learning that sometimes the truth does not arrive like a betrayal. Sometimes it arrives sheer and trembling, folded in a quiet drawer, waiting for someone brave enough to open it gently.